What if I told you that the reason you might eat bacon for breakfast, or I don't know, the reason a piano might sit in your living room, actually has nothing to do with your personal taste?
Right, which is a pretty bold claim to make right out of the gate.
It really is. But, I mean, what if it has everything to do with a secret public relations campaign designed back in the 1920s?
Oh, absolutely. It completely upends how we think about our daily routines.
Exactly, because you might feel like you're completely in charge of the actions you take every day, from, the clothes you wear to the news you read. It feels like free will.
Yeah, it feels entirely like your own choice.
But our mission today is to really explore the possibility that the very choices you are making, the options you are choosing from, were carefully curated and
Hmm.
placed in front of you by invisible hands. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks. It's it is a premise that challenges our fundamental understanding of autonomy, honestly.
For sure.
Today, we are analyzing a stack of excerpts from a highly influential book. It was published in 1928, and it's simply titled Propaganda, written by Edward Bernays.
Yeah, and that word alone, propaganda.
Right. The word itself carries heavy baggage today. It's, often associated with state-sponsored lies or totalitarian regimes. But this source material is going to challenge you to view it through a completely different lens.
Totally.
Bernays presents propaganda not as this malicious deception, but actually as the invisible machinery that keeps a complex modern society from just, well, descending into total chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Bernays starts with a central thesis that is just incredibly provocative. I mean, he argues that the conscious, intelligent manipulation of the masses of you and me is actually an essential stabilizing element of democratic society.
Yeah, he really doesn't pull any punches there,
No, he drops this bombshell really early in the text. He says that we are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, largely by men we have never heard of.
which sounds terrifying at first glance.
Right, he literally refers to them as our invisible governors. But, and this is key, he isn't spinning a conspiracy theory here. He is laying out a sociological mechanism. And it all comes down to the sheer burden of choice.
Exactly. The theoretical ideal of a democracy is that every single citizen makes up their own mind on public questions and private conduct.
Right, like we all have infinite time and energy.
Right. In that purely theoretical world, you would research every political candidate's entire voting record perfectly. You would, I don't know, chemically analyze every bar of soap before you bought it to ensure it was the most efficient cleanser.
Oh, wow, yeah. I barely have time to read the ingredients on my shampoo, let alone chemically analyze dozens of soaps.
Exactly. You'd have to study all the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every single daily decision.
Which is physically impossible. I mean, if we all actually had to process that much raw data before making a choice, society would just freeze. It would hopelessly jam.
It would completely stall out.
Reading this, it feels like Bernays is describing like a 1920s version of a modern search algorithm.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, because when you search for something online, you don't want 5 billion unranked results, right? You want the algorithm to sift through all that overwhelming data and just give you the top 10 practical options.
Yes, you want the curation.
Right. And Bernays is arguing that society does exactly this voluntarily. We let an invisible government sift the data and high spot the outstanding issues, narrowing down our field of choice to practical proportions.
Pushing that algorithm analogy further, it's fascinating because the 1928 version operated through physical, interlocking social groups.
Okay, how so?
Well, Bernays points out that American voters quickly found that without organization, their individual votes would produce nothing but confusion. So rudimentary political parties arose almost overnight to narrow the choices.
Makes sense.
But this organizing principle goes far beyond just politics. It seeps into every facet of life. The text lists an incredible array of groups: Rotary clubs, neighborhood bridge clubs, the League to Abolish Capital Punishment, the American Astronomical Association, sororities.
He even mentions these super niche groups like the Anti-Profanity League
Yes.
and the National Pickle Packers Association. I mean, there are thousands of them. And the crucial part is how they all interlace. The text gives us the example of this hypothetical guy, John Jones.
Right, the everyman.
Yeah, John Jones isn't just an isolated consumer. He's a Rotarian, he belongs to a church, a fraternal order, a political party, a chamber of commerce, and a golf club.
And the mechanism at play here relies heavily on social proof and cognitive efficiency. When an idea is injected into one of those groups,
John Jones absorbs it.
exactly, he absorbs it. And because he is a trusted node in those other networks, he disseminates that idea into the other groups where he has influence.
So it just spreads organically.
Right. When John speaks at the Rotary Club, the members aren't analyzing his argument from scratch. They are outsourcing their judgment to a trusted peer just to save mental energy.
So by bypassing the critical thinking they might use against a complete stranger, ideas cascade rapidly through these pre-existing structures.
Yes, this intertwining network is the actual machinery by which democracy organizes its group mind.
But let me push back on this on behalf of the listener for a second. Isn't democracy supposed to be about absolute, untethered free will? I mean, this framing makes it sound like we are voluntarily handing over our brains to unseen leaders just to save some time.
It does sound like that. But Bernays addresses that tension directly. He actually quotes the author Emil Ludwig, who represents Napoleon as observing the impotence of force to organize anything.
The impotence of force, meaning you can't just force people to fall in line.
Exactly. You cannot forcibly compel millions of people to organize their thoughts. We voluntarily consent to have our choices narrowed by leadership and propaganda because the alternative is complete societal paralysis.
It's chaos otherwise.
Right. As civilization became more complex, with the printing press, the railroad, and the telegraph allowing ideas to spread instantaneously, the technical means were invented to regiment opinion, basically to maintain order.
Wow. So if we are voluntarily surrendering some of that raw analytical independence to maintain order, the next question is how this invisible machinery actually operates day to day.
And that requires looking at the evolution of the word propaganda itself.
Right, because the text explains that the word originally had entirely wholesome roots, which is wild to think about now.
Very different from today's usage.
Yeah, its origins date back to the year 1627 when Pope Urban VIII founded the College of the Propaganda for the Education of Missionary Priests. It literally just meant an effort directed systematically toward gaining public support for an opinion or a course of action.
What's fascinating here is that the shift in public perception took place mainly during what the text calls the late war, referring, of course, to World War I.
Ah, right.
Governments utilized mass persuasion on a global scale, and the term took on a decidedly sinister complexion. But from a sociological standpoint, Bernays argues that whether propaganda is good or bad depends entirely on the merit of the cause urged and the correctness of the information published.
So the tool itself is neutral.
Exactly. If you believe you have a valuable truth, it is your duty to disseminate it using organized effort.
And the way those truths could be disseminated changed fundamentally because of universal education, right? The democratic doctrine ran that universal literacy would educate the common man to control his environment.
That was the hope, anyway.
The theory was that once you could read and write, you would have a mind fit to rule.
But Bernays points out a profound sociological irony here. Instead of creating a society of independent, original thinkers, universal literacy essentially gave the common man what the text calls rubber stamps.
Rubber stamps, yes. Rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, editorials, published scientific data, and just the platitudes of history. It's such a striking image.
It really is.
Because reading allowed the rapid dissemination of standardized ideas. Millions of people exposed to the same stimuli receive identical imprints. We're getting wholesale ideas. And a huge part how those rubber stamps are applied is, well, through the news.
Yes. The casual reader accepts newspapers as accounts of spontaneous happenings. But Bernays pulls back the curtain to show how news is often meticulously manufactured.
Manufactured news.
He cites specific examples from page 1 of the New York Times. He notes that 4 out of 8 important news stories on a given day were actually organized propaganda.
Right, like that headline about 12 nations warning China that reform must come before relief. That wasn't just a spontaneous event that journalists stumbled upon.
Not at all.
It was a joint report, carefully prepared and presented to the American public specifically to support the State Department's view. And he also brings up a report by a Dr. Pritchett on Zionism, which was broadcast with the full authority of the Carnegie Foundation.
And the text makes it very clear, these are not given as examples of malicious lies. They illustrate how conscious direction is given to events to influence public opinion.
So they're staging reality, in a way.
Exactly. The propagandist isn't just writing an article. They are creating an event so significant that the news media is simply compelled to cover it. But manufacturing news is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, the real power is when they manufacture reality itself. creating circumstances so inescapable that they alter entire industries.
Which brings us to the velvet fashion operation mentioned in the text.
I love this example.
It's a perfect illustration of manufacturing reality in the commercial realm. American velvet manufacturers were facing financial ruin because velvet had simply gone out of fashion.
So under the old way of doing things, they might just, buy a bunch of newspaper ads saying, buy velvet. Velvet is great.
Which would have failed completely. Analysis showed that direct pleading would never work. You can't just command people to like something. You have to hunt for the anatomical vital spot of the industry.
And for them, the home of fashion was Paris.
Right, and Lyon being the home of silk, they attacked the problem at the source. They didn't target the American consumer first. They went to Europe and enlisted an intelligent Parisian to visit the famous couturier figures like Lanvin, Worth, and Patou.
The absolute titans of fashion.
Yes, and they convinced them to use velvet in their upcoming gown and hat collections.
But they didn't stop there, right? They arranged for distinguished countesses and duchesses to wear these new velvet creations.
Social proof at the highest level.
Exactly. Then, when the American buyer or the American woman of fashion looked to Paris for the latest trends, they were simply shown the velvet designs. They bought velvet because they genuinely liked it and because it was objectively in fashion.
The editors of American magazines and fashion reporters then reflected this newly created circumstance in their news, which in turn subjected the everyday consumer to the exact same influences.
A trickle of velvet became a flood.
They didn't sell velvet. They orchestrated a global fashion trend that naturally pulled the consumer toward the product.
So if circumstances are being artificially created on this massive scale, someone has to be pulling the levers.
Always.
If you try to list the molders of public opinion, you immediately think of the people in Who's Who, right? The President of the United States, cabinet members, powerful financiers on Wall Street, newspaper editors.
Sure, the visible leaders.
The text acknowledges these people have immense power, but then it reveals the invisible wire pullers behind them.
This touches directly on our perception of agency. The text provides a remarkably grounded example of how this invisible rule affects daily life through the story of a hypothetical John Smith in Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, right, the tailor example. So John Smith is buying a suit of clothes. He imagines that he is freely choosing, according to his own taste and personality, the exact kind of garment he prefers. He thinks it's a reflection of his individual identity.
In reality, he may be obeying the dictates of an anonymous gentleman tailor in London.
It's wild.
This London tailor suggests to British noblemen and fashion leaders that they wear, say, blue cloth instead of gray, or 2 buttons instead of 3. The distinguished customers approve the change. Then that gentleman tailor, who is under contract with a large American firm, instantly sends them the new designs.
So the American firm manufactures the suits, advertises them as the latest fashion in New York and Chicago.
And the Topeka man simply recognizes this leadership and complies.
His aesthetic choice was basically decided in a room in London months before he ever walked into the store.
Entirely without his knowledge.
As society got more complex, relying on these intricate, interlacing chains of influence, a brand new profession was born to manage it all. The text calls it the Public Relations Council.
The new profession grew up because governments, industries, and charities realized they depend completely upon acquiescent public opinion.
It's all about public consent.
Right. The text compares the Public Relations Council to a lawyer. While a lawyer concentrates on the legal aspects of a client's business, pleading before a judge and jury, the PR Council focuses on the public contacts, pleading before the court of public opinion.
Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? Because I have to ask, is a PR council just a spin doctor putting lipstick on a pig?
Yeah.
Like, if an institution or a product is fundamentally flawed, do they just use psychological tricks to deceive the public into accepting it?
The text explicitly corrects that assumption, framing the ethics of the PR Council as highly practical. Bernays states plainly that it is futile to attempt to sell an idea or prepare the ground for a product that is basically unsound.
So you can't just trick people forever.
No, the Public Relations Council doesn't just broadcast what the client wants. It operates as a two-way street. They must often advise the client to actually modify their own behavior or product to fit the public's shifting demands.
Right. The text illustrates this beautifully with the example of an orphan asylum that was losing contributions and facing public hostility. The PR Council doesn't just launch a campaign with sadder pictures of orphans to guilt the public into donating.
Right. That'd be the old way.
Instead, they analyze the public sentiment and realize the public now heavily favors modern sociological trends.
To solve the PR crisis, they actually advised the orphanage to change its physical institution to the new cottage plan.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, instead of bleak, Dickensian institutional dormitories, they physically restructured the asylum into smaller, family-style cottages with house parents.
Oh, wow, so a real structural change.
Yes, this aligned the institution with the progressive 1920s sociological ideals. The PR Council didn't mask a failing institution. They modernized the institution itself so the public would organically want to support it.
Another brilliant example of this two-way street is the corset makers. When corsets went out of fashion because women had socially emancipated themselves and wanted freedom of movement, a PR council wouldn't blindly try to force the old restrictive corsets back onto the market.
That would be totally counterproductive.
Yeah, they analyzed the societal shift, advised the manufacturers that selling the old product was impossible, and suggested they create a new type of girdle that eliminated the unhealthful features. They adapted the product to the new reality. It's about eliminating the waste and friction when industry does things the public simply does not want.
Assuming the product or the idea is sound, the focus then shifts to how the PR Council actually persuades the public. And this relies on the systematic study of mass psychology.
This is where it gets really deep into the human mind.
Yes. The text leans heavily on theorists like Wilfred Trotter, Gustave Le Bon, and Sigmund Freud. The fundamental conclusion they reached is that the group mind does not think in the strict rational sense of the word.
It substitutes rational thoughts for impulses, habits, and emotions.
Exactly. Gustave Le Bon first proposed that when people join a crowd, they lose their conscious personality. They stop analyzing facts and operate on primal instincts.
They just get swept up in it.
Wilfred Trotter expanded on this by defining the herd instinct, showing that humans have a biological need to conform to the group for safety. Therefore, the most firmly established principle of mass psychology is that the group's first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader.
But the herd still has to make decisions even when a leader isn't explicitly telling them what to do. The text explains that without a leader, the public relies on cliches, pat words, or images which stand for a whole group of ideas. These act as cognitive shortcuts.
The text impartially notes historical examples of this mechanism at work in political discourse. It observes that not many years ago, it was only necessary to tag a political candidate with the word "the interests" to stampede millions of people into voting against him.
Just that one phrase.
Yes, anything associated with the interests seemed necessarily corrupt. Later, the word Bolshevik performed a similar service for persons who wished to frighten the public away from a line of action.
So these trigger words bypass logic entirely and evoke immediate, conditioned emotional responses.
They absolutely do.
And it isn't just politics, right? It dictates our deeply personal motivations, too. Drawing on Freud's school of thought, the text points out that people are largely actuated by motives they conceal from themselves.
The subconscious drives.
Exactly. Freud showed that our conscious reasons are often just rationalizations for subconscious drives. A man might say he buys a specific motor car because he studied the technical features for locomotion, comparing the engine specs and the fuel efficiency.
But in reality, he bought it because a friend he respects bought one, or because it acts as a symbol of social position and success.
He wants to signal his status to his neighbors.
Right. He is entirely fooling himself about his own motives. An effective public relations counsel understands those hidden motives. They know that you don't just sell the mechanical structure of a car, you sell the human desire for prestige.
As the text states, an engineer must know how steam behaves under pressure to make an engine run. A propagandist must know human desires to make the social machine work.
This understanding of hidden motives leads to a stark contrast in the text between old salesmanship and new salesmanship.
Oh, the bacon strategy?
Yes, take the goal of selling more bacon. The old type of salesmanship would just reiterate a million times in full-page newspaper ads. Eat more bacon. Eat bacon because it's cheap, because it's good, because it gives you reserve energy.
Which is just a direct assault on the consumer's rational brain.
Exactly. But the newer salesmanship understands the group structure of society and the herd instinct. Instead of yelling at the consumer, the propagandist asks a structural question. Who is it that influences the eating habits of the public?
And the answer is physicians.
Yes. So the new salesman doesn't talk to the public at all. He suggests to physicians to state publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon.
Because he knows with mathematical certainty that large numbers of people will blindly follow the health advice of their doctors.
The campaign removes sales resistance by simply altering the environment around the consumer.
Which brings us to the piano example, which honestly feels exactly like a psychological heist, like straight out of the movie Inception.
It really is Inception.
If you want to sell a Mozart piano under the old salesmanship, you buy an ad that says, "Buy a Mozart piano now, it is cheap, the best artists use it."
But that direct appeal is competing against ads for motor cars and radios, all fighting for the consumer's limited dollar.
Right. So the modern propagandist doesn't appeal to the rational desire for a piano because that desire might not currently exist at all. Instead, they appeal to a fundamental instinct, such as the desire for a beautiful, socially respected home.
They endeavor to develop public acceptance of the idea of a music room in the home.
And to do this, the PR Council organizes an exhibition of period music rooms designed by well-known decorators. They stage a high-profile event featuring a famous violinist and a prominent society leader in one of these rooms.
And influential architects, catching on to the trend, start including a specially charming niche for a piano in their new floor plans.
It's brilliant. This concept of the music room is projected through the public consciousness. Eventually, a person who has built a music room or, arranged a musical corner in their parlor to keep up with the trend will naturally think of buying a piano to fill it.
The new salesmanship has completely reversed the process. By creating the social circumstance where a music room is a status symbol, they cause the prospective purchaser to say to the manufacturer, "Please sell me a piano."
And the consumer believes the idea originated entirely within their own mind.
That is the sheer power of understanding associative processes and mass psychology.
Let's step back and synthesize the journey we've taken through this text today. We started with the jarring realization that invisible governance isn't some glitch in our democracy, but actually the very mechanism that prevents our complex society from hopelessly jamming up with information overload.
We rely on those interlocking networks and trusted leaders to narrow our choices so we can actually function.
Right. We examined how the modern PR Council evolved to navigate this complex reality. Their primary tool is not necessarily deception, but the literal creation of the circumstances of our lives.
Whether that means shifting fashion trends in Paris to save the velvet industry, or redesigning an orphanage to meet modern sociological expectations.
And we explored the deep psychology driving it all. The realization that the herd doesn't think in analytical facts but acts on biological impulses, follows trusted leaders, and rationalizes hidden motives.
They don't sell the piano, they sell the music group.
Ex-
If we connect this directly to you, the listener, the implications are profound and really immediate. Every time you read a news headline, buy a heavily marketed product, or suddenly feel the urge to follow a new lifestyle trend, you are interacting with the invisible, interlacing structures Bernays outlined nearly a century ago.
It's all still happening right now.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding this machinery isn't just an exercise in historical sociology, it is your best defense against mindless consumption in the present day.
It fundamentally changes how you perceive your own agency. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering question to mull over. Look around the room you are in right now. Pick one item you bought recently where you felt completely in control of the purchase.
Something that felt entirely like your choice.
Yeah, a specific brand of shirt, a tech gadget, maybe a piece of furniture. Now ask yourself, how far back would you have to trace the invisible wires through the algorithms, the influencers, and the meticulously crafted cultural trends to find the modern public relations council who actually put it there? Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep questioning the circumstances.